Israel says it put this summit together in a few days. Nonetheless, it clearly wanted to convey maximum symbolism and significance. In the desert kibbutz, once home to Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, the foreign ministers of Egypt, Bahrain, Morocco and the UAE, along with the US Secretary of State, espoused friendship and shared goals.
43 years ago, when Egypt and Israel made peace, unfortunately, we lost those 43 years of knowing each other better, of working together, and of changing the narrative that many generations of Israelis and Arabs have been living.
Israel's foreign minister said this first meeting would become a permanent forum, but he also advanced goals for the here and now.
This new architecture, the shared capabilities we are building, intimidates and deters our common enemies, first and foremost, Iran and its proxies.
There was shared condemnation of an attack on Sunday by suspected ISIL-linked gunmen that killed 2 Israeli security forces personnel. On the wider security picture, the US Secretary of State stuck to his script, not bending to Israel's opposition to a revived Iran nuclear deal. He did, though, raise the Palestinian aspiration for statehood.
These regional peace agreements are not a substitute for progress between Palestinians and Israelis. One of the issues we discussed today was how countries involved in the Abraham Accords and normalization, as well as those that have long-standing diplomatic relationships with Israel, can support the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people in concrete ways.
That was echoed by the Arab foreign ministers, most explicitly by Egypt's.
During these discussions, we did highlight the importance of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, the importance of maintaining the credibility and the viability of the two-state solution, that for Israel and a Palestinian state to live side by side in peace, with recognized borders for a Palestinian state in accordance with the 67 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital.
For the Palestinian leadership, however, such words are just that, words. They see this entire summit in this place as an undermining of their cause for sovereignty and independence. The Palestinian Prime Minister focused on what was happening inside Israel.
وهي تقوم بذلك تتجاهل قضايا شعب.
Arab normalization meetings without ending the Israeli occupation of Palestine are just an illusion, a mirage, and a free reward for Israel.
The Palestinian president, meanwhile, had his own diplomacy to conduct, welcoming Jordan's King Abdullah to Ramallah on a mission to calm tensions ahead of Ramadan. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, Southern Israel.
Nida Ibrahim has more on reaction to the Negev Summit from Ramallah in the West Bank.
There is a lot of criticism by Palestinian officials at the way the Americans and some Arab leaders are dealing with this whole issue. Palestinian officials have been saying over the past few months even that we want to engage in a political process that ends the Israeli occupation. They're refusing any talks of better living conditions, of diffusing tension, while the Palestinians are still living and feeling the brunt and the pain of being under the Israeli occupation. There's a lot of talk in the street as well. They're saying that the world is dealing with double standards. When it comes to the Palestinian, we see them sympathizing with Ukrainians as they are now under the Russian occupation, but turning a blind eye when it comes to Palestinians who have been living under the Israeli occupation for decades. So there's a lot of disappointment amongst politicians and people in the street asking to be part of the dialogue, asking the world to impose sanctions on Israel to end its occupation. And we're seeing that they're getting some positive signs from Jordan. Instead of the Jordanian being in the summit, we hear that they declined the invitation and the Jordanian king has decided to meet with President Abbas. The talks are mostly discussing coordinating efforts to diffuse tension. Jordan is the custodian of the holy sites in Jerusalem. There are a lot of talks about how to prevent an escalation ahead of the holy month of Ramadan.